a few more people get on today, but I want to go ahead and kick this off so we can get started today. I would like all participants to know that we are recording this session and it will be available on our website later on if you want to go back and review it. We'll also be making this handout available to everyone that attended as well on our website. My name is John Bass. I'm the Chief Operating Officer with AESA, and I'm very pleased to have you with us today for our session on being presented by one of our business partners. We have a new or fairly new business partner that we are very proud to be able to present to you today, and that's iSpy 2020. One of the things that I have learned in working with this company is that they do things a little bit differently than what I've seen before in the way of vision screening, and it's a way that kids relate to, and it is much more modern than anything you've ever seen before. It's just an outstanding service that they offer our members. We're very glad to have them on as partners. The speaker today is Richard Terendi, who is the CEO and founder of iSpy 2020. This particular group has been with us with AESA for about half of a year, and we're so pleased to have them with us to look at new ways of doing vision screening during and after COVID-19. We know this is going to be something that our members need, the schools that they serve need. That doesn't go away, and it's such a different process that I'm so pleased to be able to bring it to you today. I know in the past, the eye charts that we've all seen, we're all familiar with, we realize that can only check for certain things, and it's not as an exact science is what we're going to be looking at. And what we all know as educators is if a kid can't see, then learning and learning readiness is hampered by that. We've got to catch any type of eye issue early in order for a kid to be ready to learn, because if they can't see well, then trying to help them learn is going to be a big challenge. And so that's one of the reasons that I'm very excited today to have this session on vision screening during and after COVID-19. We think that it's something that will be very valuable to our members. And Rich, thank you so much for being here and being with us today. Thank you for your partnership with AESA. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Rich, to begin sharing information on your services.
Well, John, thank you for that kind introduction. It may be inappropriate, but I was wondering if you'd be willing to just do the rest of the presentation because you're much more articulate than I am. For those of you that are in attendance or subsequently watching this, thank you for spending your time doing so. The subtitle of this presentation is The Why Has Not Changed, The How Should. And I'm going to just humbly suggest that it's not a question of, not a question of if it should change, but the how must change. And I hope in the next few minutes, you'll see why I feel so strongly about that. But before talking about the how with regards to vision screening, I want to do just a few talking points with regards to the why. Because for so long, there has been this mystery between vision and learning, the link between vision and learning. And not too long ago, a very smart woman by the name of Wendy Beth Rosen compiled hundreds of pieces of research. This is not anecdotal information. This is scientific research that she compiled into a great piece of literature called The Hidden Link Between Vision and Learning. And because of her outstanding work, hopefully the link between vision and learning will no longer be hidden. Now, we're talking about hundreds of pages here, so my intention is certainly not to go through all that information, but I just want to highlight a couple of the salient points from her literature. In the first chapter, she immediately jumps into the fact that there is a very strong link between the child's overall development process, in particular academic achievement, and over a dozen visual skills that are involved in this learning process. In fact, 80% of learning occurs through the visual processing of information. And I'm going to show you what that looks like diagrammatically in just a couple of minutes. But in red, I highlighted something that I'm going to come back to a couple more times, and that is, she talks about this on page 4, again, right from the outset. She says, these skills are not evaluated in the vision screening that utilizes only the Snellen chart. So when we're talking about the Snellen chart, we're talking about the wall chart that you very often see on the wall. In chapter 2, she talks about the relationship, again, between vision and a number of maladies that afflict children. But one of those maladies is attention-related or hyperactivity disorders. And again, this is incredible because for so long, there wasn't the scientific research to understand that these are directly linked. Chronic vision disorders and the exacerbation or misdiagnosis of attention-related disorders, there's a link. And I don't have to tell any of you that, children that suffer from ADHD, again, also tend to suffer academically. And again, highlighted in red is the same theme, and that is to say that outdated means of examining children's vision, it's failing the very children that we have dedicated our lives to serving. In chapter 6, I highlighted in green something that is a very strong statement, and when you first hear it, it may sound like an overreach. It may sound like it's overstated. Dr. Moskowitz said that knowledge about vision-related learning problems will change lives and change the world. And that is a very strong statement. However, I think that the more you learn about vision and how it affects virtually every facet of a child's life, especially academic performance and learning in general, you'll come to that same conclusion. Because we all know that a child that struggles academically is invariably going to face challenges emotionally, socially, psychologically, and of course, economically as well. I'm almost done bragging about her book, but I just wanted to conclude at chapter 8, she talks about the prevalence of vision problems. And this is absolutely of epidemic proportions. We're talking about 1 out of 4 children have a vision problem that is impeding their ability to learn. And here's the thing, okay? Many of these children end up in special education programs that are inordinately expensive. I don't have to tell any of you that. We're talking about this ultimately undetected vision problems has an extraordinarily high financial cost to schools. And again, highlighted in red, it's the same theme you're already familiar with. We're using an 1800s model for evaluating visual problems. And as a result, kids are falling through the cracks. So I'm done with reviewing the why. I'll just summarize it very quickly because we now know the link, especially after reading her book, but there is just mountains of research. And by the way, if any of you want any of that research, just let me know. I'm more than happy to send it to you. So 80% of learning occurs through the visually processing information. We're talking about epidemic. It's a public health dilemma when you're talking about 25% of the kids that are impacted. There are so many other maladies that are directly attributable to undetected vision problems. And like I had mentioned, there's a real cost to schools and education. I mean, this is tremendous. Now, this isn't part of the why, but this is a segue to the next part, and that is the how. But just keep in mind, we are vision screening children the same way that we did over 150 years ago. So let's talk about what I'm going to call the old how, okay, the old how. And here's the wall chart, and you're, all familiar with that. For those of you that don't know, it's it's brand new technology. It was invented in 1862. It was first introduced into a school in the year 1899. And that is the exact same technology, for lack of a better term, that we're using today. And I just, to put things in context, imagine, God forbid, that any of you, any of us, had to go see a cardiovascular specialist because there was something wrong. At least in my mind, that's a scary proposition. And you go into the doctor's office and he starts pulling out these relics from, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, and you go, oh, that's interesting, what is that? And he's going, well, that's what I, intend on using to perform this open heart surgery. And, obviously none of us would feel comfortable with that at all. We would all, I suppose, would leave immediately and go find a doctor that is going to keep our heart pumping, and so that we can continue on doing what we want to do. So the fact that we're relegating this public health dilemma to a technology that's 150 years old is marginally problematic. Some of the problems are that the chart is very easy to memorize. And of course, you can peek, depending on how you're occluding the child's eyes, it's fairly easy for them to peek. For those of you that have either witnessed or actually performed a vision screening, this is certainly preaching to the choir, but this way of vision screening is very difficult and extraordinarily time consuming. And that's probably an understatement as well. Again, this is something you may have witnessed, but it absolutely intimidates some children. And unfortunately, the very children that have a vision problem are the ones that tend to be most intimidated. Perhaps the single largest shortcoming of traditional vision screening is that it relies so heavily on human interpretation. Therefore, it is impossible to get a standardized, accurate, reliable, valid result. I mean, you cannot remove the human variability from this equation, and that is hugely problematic. And from a cost perspective, performing a traditional vision screening doesn't collect the data for you, doesn't do the reporting for you. So there's two problems. One is that takes an additional amount of time, and it also is open to accuracy issues due to transcriptions and other things. So that's how we've been doing it. Most schools vision screen using this method. Now, there is a newer method, or I'm going to call it the newer how. And some of you may be familiar with this. This is photo screening devices. They've recently seen a resurgence in the market, but they've actually been around since the 1970s when Howard Friedman invented the technology. Now, this technology is fantastic, and I want to let you know I'm a huge proponent of photo screening when it's done appropriately for the right ages. But by the time a child is in school, this technology is no longer appropriate, and I'm going to show you why in just a second. But let's talk about the advantages, because there are significant advantages to photo screening. For example, these devices are extraordinarily fast, and they're very easy to operate. It's like taking a picture with your cell phone. There is a shortcoming, however, and that is that these pieces of equipment tend to be very expensive, and they're delicate. There's some refined optics and little computers inside these things, so they're not cheap. Pointing a device at a child does intimidate some children, so that's an issue to be contended with. And I will tell you, the biggest shortcoming, forget about the expense, the single biggest shortcoming is that it only looks at the child's eyes. Now, why is that problematic? So this is where I want to show a diagram, if I could. So let's talk about the ideal how. The ideal how, okay? So this is a kid's eyeballs, top-down view. And if that is all from an anatomical standpoint, if the eyeballs were all that was necessary in order to see or visually process information, then those photo screeners that I just showed you would be a great or perfect solution. However, as you all know, visually processing information and the process of seeing actually requires much more than eyeballs. You've got to have all of your optic nerves, the neural transmitters to the vision center of the brain, the cognitive programming of the vision center of the brain. So it's a much more holistic approach to seeing than just having two eyeballs. So again, when you talk about a device like a photo screener, what they do is they look at the eyeball. And that's great. That's a good start. And by the way, when you measure visual acuity, you also look at the eyeball. However, when you combine visual acuity with color and stereopsis or depth perception, you evaluate the entire visual system. And when you do that, you're not just answering the question, does the child have round eyeballs or appropriately spherical eyeballs? You're answering the question, are they visually ready and capable to learn? And when 80% of learning is attributed to the visual processing of information, this is our number one priority. This is the question that needs to be answered. That's why Dr. Moskowitz said what he said about changing the world. So let's talk about iSpy very, very quickly. The impetus and the most number one priority when iSpy was created was taking a reliable gold standard protocol and starting with that. See, medical efficacy is tremendously important. If you're trying to evaluate a medical condition, whether it's vision or anything else, obviously you've got to do so accurately. And so we found the most reliable, by the way, we didn't develop this gold standard protocol, the other people did, and this is what it looks like. It's a 9-page protocol. And if you committed this protocol to memory and did it perfectly each and every single time, you would get a reliable visual acuity measurement. Now, in order to do that using this protocol, it would take about 10 or 15 minutes. So you got to be fairly committed, and you have to do this perfectly every time. And by the way, with all due respect to all of us, I'm going to say it's impossible to do perfectly each and every time, particularly when you introduce the variability of dealing with younger patients. So what we did was we said, okay, that's a great protocol, but I want you to understand that iSpy was developed by schools for schools, okay? So we brought together hundreds of individuals in education, from teachers and healthcare professionals to administrators, financial people, IT professionals, the whole gamut. And one of the things that became immediately evident was they said, we understand the importance of assessing visual acuity, but we do not have 10 or 15 minutes per child. So what we did was we developed an abbreviation of that protocol and sent that abbreviated protocol in the form of iSpy to the Medical University of South Carolina. They have an ophthalmic clinic called the Storm Eye Institute. It is one of the top 10 ophthalmic clinics in the world. They took iSpy, independently evaluated it, and one of their statements in the results section is the following. iSpy screening results using a patch, which is what we use, were not significantly different than those of a professional examination. This was published in the Journal of APOS, which is their blue ribbon peer-reviewed publication. This is essentially an endorsement beyond what our expectation was. Because to vision screen a child using a piece of software and have those results not significantly differ from a professional eye examination is incredible. However, I just want to point out, iSpy is not a replacement for a full eye exam. It never will be, okay? This is to identify children that need to go be seen by an eye doctor. It is not a diagnostic or therapeutic tool. However, here's the other key. We do this in 2 to 3 minutes. And not only do we assess visual acuity, but we also assess depth perception or stereo and color. So in addition to being valid, we also had to look at conformity, which is basically a measure of both validity and reliability. So we sat down with Dr. Carmona, And he wrote a statement after his evaluation of the technology in combination with the independent study that had been done, and said that this application conforms to the national screening recommendations. So I want to show you what iSpy looks like. But before I do, there's one other little thing I want to show you, and that is data management. I want to show you what happens, because remember I said we brought together all these incredible stakeholders, your colleagues and constituents, and we said, what do you want the system to do? Medical accuracy is a foregone conclusion. It is of primal importance. But what else does the system need to provide the school in order for it to be of value? And the feedback was very clear. We do not want to be responsible for the HIPAA and FERPA compliance of vision screening data. So that's what we built into iSpy on behalf of the schools. We manage all of the data in our HIPAA FERPA compliant data repositories, and only your district has access, or only the individual school. You can protect the data at whatever level you want, but no one other than authorized personnel has access to customized summary reports, bilingual screening reports that can be sent home to the parents and guardians. You can export your data into Microsoft Excel, and of course you can bring it into other secure databases if you want to do that. So data management was also very important to schools when we were developing the system. But what's really important is, will children like the process? Is there a way that we could remove the psychosocial trepidation of the vision screening experience in such a way that we would get increased compliance and increased accuracy? And that's what we did. So that little boy is sitting 10 feet away from a laptop computer, and he is just playing a really simple matching game that looks like a cartoon from his perspective. So he gets to play around and discover all types of fun things and open up doors. That's a stereo test. He saw a shape pop out, and he goes in, and they discover different dinosaurs and all types of fun stuff. And then a report immediately pops up on the screen instantaneously, and it is the results that you can either print out or send off by other means to the parent or guardian. So again, I don't want to spend too much time on that, but I just want to give you just kind of a sneak peek. What does it look like from the child's perspective? So iSpy has been used around the world, screened almost 2 million kids at this point. It exceeds APOS and the American Academy of Pediatric recommendations. Their joint committee guidelines come out every 5 years. We exceed those recommendations. This is a patented technology. Our company is based in the United States, but like I mentioned, the technology is used around the world. We're very grateful for that. We have the bank-grade encrypted data system that is included when you use iSpy, and you can do all of this for less than the cost of the school lunch. So this isn't anything that is unreasonable from a fiscal standpoint. But I do want to talk about iSpy specifically in the era of COVID-19, because even if COVID-19 wasn't plaguing us right now, iSpy 2020 still makes sense. But it makes even more sense given this new era. First of all, we can all agree we're in uncharted territory. This is an extraordinarily unprecedented time. We all know it requires flexibility, but we cannot abandon our responsibilities. And again, it goes without saying, but that actually increases the demands on schools, because schools are the only place right now, you know, you're not allowed to, I don't have to tell any of you all of the restrictions that are being placed societally, but not on schools. So schools have been chartered with even more responsibility. Now, I can tell you, I think there's too much responsibility already placed on schools, but that's a separate webinar. It is what it is. And so as a result, as partners, we have to identify solutions that either free up and or optimize our limited resources. There's just no question about that. So what does that look like specifically in the world of vision screening? Well, traditional vision screenings are conducted in mass, and there are some good reasons why they are. If you've ever seen a vision screening at a school, it's in the cafeteria or the gymnasium or a big classroom with tons of kids running around. And the reason for that is because schools very often have very limited access to having multiple, certified or at least highly trained vision screening personnel, because you have to know how to vision screen using the wall chart. You have a desire in most states, you've got to, vision screen the required students within the first couple of months, which makes sense because you don't want kids, 6 months into the school year and no one realized they couldn't see the blackboard or whiteboard. The manual collection of data is actually easier when you do the vision screenings over a shorter time frame. It just makes sense, right? You just get all of that done in one foul swoop, as opposed to trying to input the data over months and months and months. But here's the problem: when you do vision screenings in mass, it's very obvious you're not complying with the CDC recommendations for social distancing, and so that's problematic. Now, let's talk about I Spy. In the COVID world. First of all, you don't need certified or trained personnel to operate the program. That study that I had previously mentioned at the Storm Eye Institute, they actually used Boy Scout, 11-year-old Boy Scouts, to vision screen younger children. Now, that's in the study. So again, I'm more than happy to send you the study, but they were not using trained professionals. They were using kids to vision screen kids. Not suggesting that schools want to do that. Certainly high schoolers could get community volunteer hours by doing that, however. It automates, as you saw, the data collection and report creation process, so it saves significant time there. But here's the real important point, and that is it offers flexibility. And that's extraordinarily important because the flexibility in how you configure iSpy provides for social distancing. And again, before I show you that configuration, it's incredibly important to understand that this is something that provides schools with an accurate, valid, and reliable way to screen your students, and to do so within the required time constraints. So let's talk about that in the era of COVID-19. If you just installed iSpy, let's say in the health office on a single computer, because we're talking about a piece of software, if you did 4 students an hour, now that's an ultra conservative estimate, right? So it takes 2 to 3 minutes to vision screen a student. So that gives you 5 minutes to get the student down from the classroom. You do your vision screening, you send them back, now you send another one. So I mean, this is an ultra conservative estimate. But if you did 4 students an hour, you did that for, 5 hours out of the day, you got 100 students a week, you've got your entire campus screened, within the first month. And not only did you get the kids screened, but you didn't spend any time having to then manually record the results. So this is how iSpy allows you to comply with social distancing and still get all of your kids screened within the compressed time frame, or the appropriate time frame. But again, everything is compressed when you keep adding more and more to schools' responsibilities. Now, adopting iSpy during COVID may make sense, but in my opinion, it does not make sense to do so if it doesn't have application or benefit after COVID. So I want to share with you how iSpy is in use commonly. And that is, you walk into a school and you'll see, let's say, 8 computers. Some schools use 10 or 12 or 20, but let's just talk about 8 computers. And by the way, the beautiful thing is these computers have utility when they're not being used for iSpy. So you're not spending $8,000 on a camera that's only used for vision screening. You're taking laptops that the school already has, putting the software on it, using it for a day, and then the computers are, back being utilized for whatever their intended purpose was. But with 8 computers, you're easily doing 100 students an hour. So within half a day, you've screened the entire campus. I'm talking about 400 students. Obviously, those numbers shift accordingly. But that gives you an idea of, being able to go in and you can screen 2 schools a day using I-SPY 2020. And so I would humbly suggest that right now, I-SPY 2020, both during and after COVID, is really the best how, because we're talking about a very accurate assessment of the entire visual system. So again, we're ensuring that children are visually ready to learn. This is proven, validated technology, meets the national guidelines, saves a ton of time. You get bilingual reporting, and really there's negligible cost. And that's not to trivialize the fiscal constraints that everyone in this economy is facing. But one of the significant benefits is that this is not a device that can, be dropped or lost or stolen or broken, whatever. It's a software system, and so that's a significant benefit to the schools as well with regards to risk mitigation. So with that, I'll stop yapping, and on the line, we have Donovan Livingston, who is our product manager, both domestically and internationally. And I believe that Donovan was collecting any questions that may have been asked while I was rambling. So, Donovan, is there anything we need to address?
No real questions at this time, but I'll take any questions after the fact, and you pretty much hit all points.
Okay. Do they just type those into the chat box, or how are questions submitted to you?
Yes, people can just, if you have questions right now, it'd be a good time to be able to ask them while we have the experts online with us. And so feel free to use the chat box. And
well, we got one question from Rachel asking, what does the price look like? Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. The price varies depending on, for lack of a better term, economy of scale. So there's a certain amount of infrastructure that needs to be put in place. So if you're going into a small school, the price can be as high as $5 or $6 per child. Well, I should say per screening. However, the cost very rapidly goes down to about $3. I think we're at about $3 a screening when we implement at any scale at all. That's about where the bottom is. And it's a cost per screening. So if you have a school of 700 children, but you're only required by state statute to screen 200 kids, then you're only essentially purchasing 200 screenings. You don't have to purchase a service for students that are not receiving the service. What we have found in many instances, though, is that there are schools that, after using I-SPY, they recognize the benefit of identifying or screening all children and actually increase their vision screenings to incorporate students that are not required by law, but they still feel that there's value, which we agree with, by the way. So anyway, that was long-winded. I apologize.
No problem. Richard, we have one more question from Mr. Lazinger. How does the vision screening work like a game? Oh, that's actually a very, very good question. Boy, so that's actually a wonderful question. So there are several, I should back up. I-SPY 2020 worked with Carnegie Mellon University, their entertainment college, which was founded and led for many years by the late Randy Pausch. Some of the most brilliant minds in the electronic entertainment video gaming industry originate from CMU. And we've worked with Randy and his team to take the challenge, if you will, of assessing visual acuity, assessing color, assessing stereo, and gamifying it. And so what we've done is, from the child's perspective, they think it's just a simple matching game. So they're matching shapes, or they're matching letters, or they're identifying things, again, with through the color vision testing, we actually show certain shapes that they would not be able to discern if they're colorblind. But the consistent theme throughout the entire process, the entire vision screening process, is one of matching. So we will show 4 objects, one of which is the object they should be able to see, and then they move the mouse left or right, and then when they have lined up what they believe to be the quote-unquote matching object, then they click the button. There's no negative reinforcement, so there's no adverse, response if they cannot successfully match what they see on the screen. But they do get positive reinforcement in that there's a cartoon animation, which, by the way, can be turned off. And if you turn off the animations, you can actually increase the screening time or decrease the screening time fairly substantially. So for older children, as an example, you may opt to turn off the animation. But for younger children, it's really important because it does engage them throughout the process. But yeah, from a kid's perspective, it's just a really simple matching game. And but what's going on behind the scenes is that we are measuring the child's responses about 1,000 times a second, which sounds like overkill, but we're actually looking for very subtle differences that a human being would have a more challenging time detecting. So we're looking for very subtle performance differences between the left and right eye, as well as how the eyes work together when again, in order to process information. I hope that answered your question. If there's something more specific, let me know.
That was great, Richard. Thank you. One last question. Could schools use grant money from PTO or PTAs or federal or state grants to pay for this program?
Yeah. Oh, that's another fantastic question. In fact, whoever asked that, I thank them, because I neglected to mention in all of my rambling that one of the things that when we had focus groups come together, that was one of the things that they had mentioned to us, was that, we might not have this necessarily in our budget, but what if we could go out and get money from a local insurance agent or a local grocery store or a local bank? Or what if we could apply for a grant? Is there some way that we could do that? And we said, well, of course, but what we would like to offer them in return is recognition on the vision screening reports. That way, the parents and guardians, as well as anyone within the school system, understands that the vision screening was actually financially underwritten in part or in whole from whatever entity that is. So the short answer to your question is yes, and the long answer is not only yes, but they can be recognized on your vision screening reports as an additional incentive if that is desirable.
Great. I think that answers all the questions that we have for now. So,
the one thing that I'd like to say.
Go ahead, Rich.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm not sure what the protocol is, John, and I'm sure you were going to talk about this. But whatever mechanism is appropriate with your members, we are ready and willing and happy to answer any questions. I think that once people start to digest the information, they may have subsequent questions. And Donovan is an endless resource, and he'll occasionally tap me. So we're ready to chat with anyone if they want more information.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, Rich and Donovan. We appreciate your session today. It's been very informative. I would like to encourage people that are online, please, if you want some contact information, feel free to reach out to me. Whenever we send out this recording and the slides, we'll make sure we have the contact information for Rich and Donovan as well, so that you can reach out to them if you have more specific questions, you want to follow up. This is something that's beginning to be very popular with our members. It's a new partnership that we have in place. Like I said, we've just been with iSpy a few months, but the longer we've gotten to work with them, the more our members are seeing value in looking at new ways of looking at vision screening. It's just so revolutionary that we really appreciate their partnership, and we'll make sure we send out the contact information whenever we send out the slide deck. So thank you again, iSpy 2020. We thank you for the partnership. Thank you for what you do for children and for schools, and what we think we can do moving forward. So thank you again, everyone, for joining with us, and we'll see you next time at our next event. Thanks so much.